This past year has been quite the tough one for General Motors. It had to deal with the fallout of the Chevrolet Bolt EV battery fires and the still ongoing battery recall campaign, both of which caused it to sell an embarrassingly low number of electric vehicles last year. It had to deal with the parts shortage like every other automaker on the planet, and it had some embarrassing sound bites to deal with, courtesy of the President of the United States deciding that it was good optics to pretend GM was leading the EV world, not Tesla. But all of that is behind it now. Its Detroit Hamtramck facility is currently expanding its production line so it can produce more Hummer EVs. It's readying its Silverado EV for its series production debut next year, and the Chevrolet Bolt EV and Bolt EUV are finally being sold again as GM deals with the backlog of orders that occurred when it halted production of the same in order to deal with the aforementioned battery recall. And yesterday, GM unveiled its latest new electric car, the Chevrolet Blazer EV, a name that suggests GM executives are either leaning hard into the worst marketing dad joke in decades in order to completely own what happened to a few dozen Bolts, or they're just pretending it never happened. But you know what? The Blazer EV, name aside, ticks a whole lot of boxes. Throughout the lineup GM has built for the model, it goes all the way from a family-oriented crossover to a V8 besting performance model, and even a police pursuit variant. This is gonna be big, at least if you can live without a front trunk. Just like the Chevrolet Silverado EV we got a chance to see earlier this year in Detroit, which shares nothing with the Silverado HD ICE pickup, except the name, the Chevrolet Blazer EV is nothing like the current ICE Blazer. Sure, there are a few design cues here and there that evoke the car it shares a name with, but the EV version somehow feels less soccer mum and more go-getter. Part of that is down to various design elements stolen from the current Camaro and Corvette. Part of that is down to the more aerodynamic front and more prominent wheel arches. And part of that is due to what I'm going to call the de-boxification of the internal combustion engined mid-size SUV into something more aerodynamic and energy efficient. And to be honest, it feels like GM has managed to do what Ford did with the Mustang Mach-E, create a sporty-looking electric crossover whose looks are going to appeal to a wide customer base in its home market of North America. Like pretty much every EV crossover today, there's minimal overhang front and rear, with as much space in between front and rear axles as absolutely possible. GM says the Blazer EV has the longest wheelbase of any EV in the electric crossover segment, but hasn't actually provided figures to back that up yet. Of course, the reason for this long wheelbase is to give as much space to the battery pack as possible. That battery pack is, of course, courtesy of GM's new Ultium platform, the same flexible 800-volt battery pack and powertrain system that underpins the all-new Cadillac Lyriq, the Hummer EV, and the Silverado EV. I'll come back to that in a second because there's a lot to unpack when it comes to battery and drivetrain choices. So for now, let's finish looking at design and space. While the shape of the Blazer EV remains the same throughout all trims, the front trim pieces depends on which variant you're buying. At the entry-level end, the Blazer EV 1LT and 2LT feature body-coloured front bumpers that use a similar design aesthetic to the current Bolt EV and Bolt EUV. There's a black faux grille between the two narrow headlights, offering contrast to the Chevy badge, and then there's a black trim just in front of the A-pillar that creates the illusion of a vent panel for brakes. Shift to the higher-end RS, and that body-coloured lower trim piece becomes a contrast black faux grille with red RS lettering. There's also the now almost obligatory light bar joining the front headlights, something that's carried over into the range-topping SS variant, complete with illuminated Chevy bow tie. And the SS grille? Well, that's the most sporty of the lot, disguising the lack of traditional grille with a massive black that from a distance would look like any ICE car inlet you'd care to mention. I personally think there's hints of Mitsubishi crossover here, and frankly, I can't decide if I like it or not. At the rear, there are fairly conventional tail lights which appear to be brake and turn signals, but I should also caution that there are two smaller lights embedded low into the rear bumper next to the reverse lights. Given that GM moved the Bolt EV and Bolt EUV stop lights down there for the previous model year, I want to wait until I've seen and driven the Blazer EV before I proclaim what each light does. Lift up the rear hatch, which is powered on higher trim variants, and there's a decent sized load space, complete with a 60/40 rear seat that gives a completely flat floor. There's an underfloor space too, but no details on exact luggage carrying capabilities. At a glance, I'm going to guess it's a tad smaller than the load bay in the Cadillac Lyriq, but not by much, and that's because based on what I can see here, the Cadillac Lyriq and Blazer EV are probably more closely related than the ICE Blazer and the Blazer EV are. And as a side, apparently, Chevy executives have insisted there's no parts sharing between the two cars, but the Blazer EV and the Lyriq are pretty similar in my eyes. What is missing, though, on the Blazer EV is a front trunk. Yep, while GM treated everyone to a frunk in the Silverado EV, it is completely missing for the Blazer EV. The argument here, as I understand it, is that all the power electronics have been pushed up front, but I mean, come on, GM. Frunks are becoming a fairly commonly requested feature by EV fans. However, while you and I and pretty much every EV fan are all eager to own an EV with a front trunk, the Blazer EV isn't a car designed for existing EV fans. It is instead a vehicle designed to get existing gas car drivers to make that switch. And given most buyers don't even know what a frunk is, they may not miss it as much as we'd like to think they would. GM also says that by not putting a front trunk in, it's opened up the cabin space available to passengers and cargo, and from the interior shots I've seen, that appears to be the case. Again, I'm going to reserve judgment until I sit inside one, but this is most certainly a mainstream designed cabin designed for mainstream buyers. The driver dash and centre console are two discrete screens joined by a sweeping design that's going to be familiar to those who've looked inside the Silverado EV. There are also discrete HVAC and radio controls, and unlike the trend towards invisible air vents that we see from higher-priced automakers, Chevrolet has chosen to embrace AC vents that harken back to Chevrolets of days gone by, with pod-like designs that would look at home in a Chevy of the 60s, as long as they had some extra chrome thrown in. Because of the high waistline of the Blazer EV, the driver and passenger sit pretty darned low in the cabin, so you can probably forget about resting your arm on the window ledge on a hot day, but the closed-in feel is combated by an optional full-length glass sunroof. While all models get regen on demand with a now expected GM steering wheel paddle on the left, only the RS trim gets heated front seats as standard, while the SS trim gets heated and ventilated front seats and rear outboard heated seats. Both of those models get a flattened out steering wheel that's more in line with sporty designs when compared with those found on the lower trim variants. While the interior design remains fairly similar across all trim levels, the colour options will of course change. The entry-level models get an all-black interior, which I think's pretty smart, while the RS and SS appear to get a choice of all red or two-tone red and black, depending on what you spec at point of ordering. I'm not a huge fan of that sporty look. I like my interiors to be more functional than flashy, but whatever floats your boat. What is important, though, is to reiterate that the customizable driver screen and infotainment system look a lot less nerdy than those found in the Bolt and Bolt EUV, again indicating GM is really going after more traditional car buyers with this SUV. And that's reinforced by the charging capabilities and drivetrain options. Opt for the entry-level 1LT and GM is promising a 247-mile range from a front-wheel drivetrain. Exact specs for battery pack and motor have not been released, but GM has said all Blazer EVs will come with an 11.5 kilowatt onboard AC charger and up to 190 kilowatts DC quick charging from a compatible CCS charge station. And again, here's where I'm peddling my theory that the Blazer and Lyriq are very much siblings, because the charge inlet door, a fancy motorised drop-down doohickey that's bound to get frozen up in the winter, is identical to the one on the Lyriq EV. If you've got a Blazer EV with a light bar also, I should note that you'll get a funky animation showing you just how full your battery is. It's a little like the Rivian one, but in blue rather than green. Because the Blazer EV is an Ultium-based vehicle, there's a variety of drivetrain options, with the 2LT getting either front-wheel or all-wheel drive and up to 293 miles of range per charge. That's 471 kilometres for those who prefer metric. The RS variant comes standard with either rear or front-wheel drive, with all-wheel drive as an optional extra, and there's a claimed range, according to GM's internal tests, of 320 miles or 515 kilometres, the largest of the Blazer EV variants. Meanwhile, the performance-oriented SS with all-wheel drive as standard tops the range with a claimed sub-4-second sprint time, 564 horsepower, 414 kilowatts, but that does impact range per charge to 290 miles or 467 kilometres. Sadly, there's no news on heat pumps or not, so it is unclear how much the range will be affected in winter, but I should point out that GM's Super Cruise is also standard on the SS, and I believe optional on some other trim variants. I should also mention here there's a police spec vehicle promised, but very little was discussed about that other than hints dropped that it will be capable of carrying out high-speed pursuit operations. So far then, we've got a new electric model with a pretty interesting spread of drivetrain and spec choices. So what about the all-important price? GM says the entry-level Blazer 1LT will start from just shy of $45,000 US, including fees, with the 2LT starting from just over $47.5 grand. Opt for the high-end SS, and that goes all the way up to nearly $66,000. And of course, because GM is no longer eligible for US federal tax credits, that's a price that won't drop unless you live somewhere with local incentives, or indeed in Canada. Price-wise, that's significantly more than the gasoline Blazer, which starts from just $35,000 in its base trim. But when you consider the cost of the black stuff right now, if you're a high-mileage driver, it shouldn't take that long to make up for the differentiation in sticker price, even if no local incentives are available where you live. That said, it's not the cheapest crossover to offer similar features. The Kia EV6, Hyundai Ioniq 5, Volkswagen ID4 and Ford Mustang Mach-E all undercut the Blazer EV quite considerably in their entry-level form. So I'm going to expect some price reductions and price wars over the next few years to try and make the Blazer EV more competitive. And while the Blazer may cost more, we should remember that it is, after all, aimed towards more mainstream buyers, and June saw the new average vehicle transaction price increase to just over $47,000 US, which is not far off the starting price of the Blazer EV. So it's going to mean very little to those for whom 45 grand is about right. Which brings me to GM's more affordable offerings, the Bolt EV and Bolt EUV. We've long suspected that these two models don't have much of a life left ahead of them due to GM's push towards Ultium, and we've heard many unconfirmed rumours of their ultimate demise in just a few years' time, essentially being just like the second-generation Chevrolet Volt. It had a short production run too. I suspect, in a world where large crossovers are king, GM is going to be severely tempted to cull these two soon after the 2024 Blazer comes out sometime next year. After all, fewer models means lower overheads for the company. But I really, truly hope that doesn't happen, because while the Bolt EV and Bolt EUV are two of the most affordable EVs on the market today, despite their now laughably slow rapid charging capabilities, they could actually help GM gain some serious entry-level custom in a market where $20,000 to $30,000 EVs are becoming hen's teeth rare. The Blazer really will set the EV market ablaze if it can deliver on everything it promises, at least for traditional car buyers looking for a new crossover that just happens to be an EV. Well, let's just hope there's no actual blazing taking place, if you catch my drift. But that's just me. What are your thoughts? Leave them below. And that's it for today. If you liked the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends. And don't forget to leave your thoughts below or in our free to join Discord chat room. There's a link in the video description. And if you really liked today's video, why not leave us a super thanks? It's easy to do, and everything you do send our way goes towards helping us make great content. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and our other channel, Transport Evolved Take 2, and give the bell a ring to make sure you're told when our next video goes live. Thanks on behalf of the entire crew go out to everyone who makes this channel possible. That includes everyone who supports us on Patreon and YouTube, as well as those of you who watch and share the video with your friends. If you are a supporter at the charged up level, you'll see your name right here on my right hand side. And if you've just joined and your name is not showing, sorry, we currently render the list every week or so, and sometimes our videos are produced a little bit in advance. Or no, not today. I'm not supposed to be working today, and the announcement was yesterday, and I had to set the camera up without Michael. Thanks to our self-driving tier supporters, Chris Maxwell, Pedro Mira Pinheiro, Patrick Boyaski, Bennett Elder, Brian Newton, Dave Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leon, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahoto, Brafey Wolf, Tazla in the Gong, Gordon C, Stephen O'Donoghue, Carl Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Dan Blair, Jim Burness, Chris Centaur, Chris and Michael Johnson, Peter Dillinger and Denny Hyde, and of course, out of this world thanks to our Starman level supporters, Anonymous Freak, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Rory Litwin, Joe Bresney, Reed R, JP Fagerback, Russ, Will Graylian, Matthew Drobnak, Blue Says Hello, Kevin Borrowbridge, John Lyons, Andrew Glenn, Paul Conway, Laura Reynolds, Ellery Hensley, and of course, Ian. If you'd like to be part of that amazing list, you can join Patreon at the link below. Hit the join button to support us on YouTube, or show us your support by heading to Ko-fi or our cool swag store. And if you are unable to support us financially, please know that just watching the video and sharing it and interacting with it makes a big difference. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving.